Welcome to New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me as always is Angelo Giuliano. It is quite late in the day. For me, it's 8 p.m. here in Bangkok. It is even later for Angelo. You're in Hong Kong at the moment, right? It should be 9 p.m. Welcome everyone, wherever you are, whatever time of the day it is where you are. We're going to talk about a number of topics. First, hello, Angelo. How are you?
Great, Brian. Always good to be live. And well, this time a little bit later than usual. So maybe we can catch with people from other places today. So a lot of things happening as always. There's going to be an inauguration tomorrow, inauguration of Trump. There's Gaza ceasefire. I mean, which directions do you want to go, Brian?
Well, actually, I would like to start by talking about the Russian-Iranian strategic partnership, because when you really think about it, this connects so many different things. And as you and I have always said, that all of these conflicts are interconnected. There is no conflict just happening in Gaza or just happening in Ukraine or tensions building in the Asia Pacific. It is all part of one single foreign policy pursued by unelected U.S. special interests. We're probably going to talk about that also. But first, I wanted to show everyone this Guardian article. It's kind of a checklist of all the narratives the collective West is running with the conflict in Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East. They're talking about this strategic partnership. I actually had to go to RT to figure out what this is actually about, because the Western media didn't cover any of the points of the actual agreement. So let's just take a look through the list. I'm going to read through the list, and then we could talk about this. Maybe as we go is a good idea. Mutual non-aggression guarantees, meaning neither Russia nor Iran are going to support other nations that are acting aggressively toward either or country. And this includes sanctions. So they're not going to support sanctions against one another, no matter how many countries across the collective West do it. Military cooperation, I think we've seen this developing all along, especially with the drones in Russia being built under license from Iranian designs. Iran has all kinds of ballistic missiles that I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, they were able to develop these because they were not signatories of arms control treaties as the US and Russia, before that the Soviet Union, had been for decades. They have developed missiles with capabilities and ranges that the US and Russia are right now racing to develop, now that all of these arms agreements have been scrapped. Resistance to sanctions, I think that's a no-brainer. Both countries are heavily sanctioned. Iran for decades and decades, Russia very heavily now, because of the conflict in Ukraine. So they're going to work together. And the next one kind of feeds into that one, interdependent financial infrastructure. And this is something that I think Russia, Iran, and all of BRICS need to start piecing together. Angela, I'd like to hear what you think about that toward the end. We're almost there. Arms control. I really don't know what to say about that. I think arms control is really just a way to tie your hands. The collective West is never going to honor any agreement made. So I don't know what the point of that would be. Energy and infrastructure, both nations are huge sources of hydrocarbons, exporting them. Russia has a lot of experience developing extraction of hydrocarbons and export. So there's a lot of common ground there. This is what I thought was interesting. Fighting propaganda to combat what both countries describe as disinformation and negative propaganda. It promotes closer ties between Russian and Iranian media outlets. This includes joint efforts to counter Western narratives, collaboration in producing and sharing media content. Angela, you remember me going on and on about this for years, about how Russia and China should export their means of developing their own international media platforms and their own social media networks at home to secure their own information space and to communicate their narrative to the rest of the world, to compete with and to break through Western domination of global information space. So that is something I think Iran needs a lot of help with. They have Press TV, and I want to hear your opinion on Press TV also, Angelo. Press TV, I feel like over the years, they've done a lot of good work, but overall, the vector sum they seem kind of disconnected with the rest of the world. Like it's perfectly understandable that you would be against what the Israeli government is doing. But if you're trying to communicate to a broad international audience and you refer to Israel as the Zionist entity, you automatically turn people off. You're not going to turn off people that already agree with you. But the point of Press TV is to communicate to people all around the world that haven't gotten it yet. Angela, what do you think about that? What do you think about Press TV? I've actually been on it a couple of times years ago.
I think we need to put into perspective that the means that they have. I think Press TV has a very limited means. It's not unlike RT or Chinese media. So I think considering that, I think that they're doing a rather good job. But again, I think it's important just to be, try not to be more balanced. I mean, of course, but I mean, somehow I do think that they do a good job, but it's just a matter of means and the reach they have. They have very little reach because they're shadow banning. So keep in mind that how do you get into Press TV? And there's probably so Google search. When you're doing Google search, you won't come across easily into Press TV. So I would say that the discourse that actually Russia, China, and Iran has is aimed at the global South and BRICS countries. What I think they have given up on giving the message to the US or the West, because you cannot fight the billions of dollars that is poured into Western media, into actually influencers. Remember, there's this bill that was signed by the Congress of $1.6 billion for 5 years. That's roughly $300 million a year, which is the only purpose is to demonize China. So imagine how much you can do with that. That means they can give influencers with millions of people of reach a few $1,000s just to do a video regarding China and demonizing China. You can make it a job, and actually would be, if we were on the other side, switching for the other side, would be making a lot of money. While in reality, when you look at, and I can be very transparent, I go often, I've been to RT, Press TV, Chinese media, they don't give you a penny, absolutely nothing. They don't give you anything. Because I do think that also they see us as a potential liability. If we were to get money and this would be exposed, then that would actually be some material for the West. But in reality, they don't give anything. So I think it's important just to repeat what you've been repeating all along is the information space. Sovereignty, it's not only borders, it's information space. There's many different aspects when it comes to sovereignty. You have sovereignty over your defense. You need to be self-sufficient. Your borders, information space. And this is why when you look at which countries are really sovereign states, there's not too many. I would say Russia, China, Iran somehow, but being fully sovereign, there's not too many countries. And I think the main problem we have in the West, and especially I would say in Europe, is this information space, which is completely hijacked by globalists, Atlantists, pro-NATO, pro-EU. When you say pro-EU, it's pro-US, because ultimately EU is controlled by the US. So always important to look at the various aspects of sovereignty. And I would say always it's important for people to understand that whenever you see a country, the first thing you should look at, if you want to have a fair analysis, is to look at its sovereignty on all aspects. Once you have that, then maybe you can go into ideology, but ideology has no meaning if there's no sovereignty. Don't even talk about democracy, because democracy is a process of self-determination. And I would repeat it over and over, because people don't get it. When people ask us about the US, we have a different approach. Who's in charge? Have a macro view. Actually, the question of sovereignty for the US is different, because it's the ultimate empire, which is the one actually meddling to the other countries. But I would say one by one, you can go one by one and say, is it a sovereign state or not? And right now, there's not many. and the trend we're seeing actually in around the world. And I think BRICS is actually at the forefront of this new movement. Is we see the global south changing. They're shifting, they're kicking out like foreign interference. We see that especially in Africa, French forces being kicked out. So there's this trend, and then we need to have a broader view. I would say broader view at the same time, the long term, and not and I think the events when we see, like, for example, Gaza, or like quick snapshot when you look at Syria, that doesn't give us the full picture. And we need to see also in terms of economics, because ultimately economy is number one. That's the main purpose. Actually, that's the main reason for the wars on the first place. And it's also what drives the winner ultimately wins because he has a solid foundation in terms of economy. And that's what we saw with Russia. Why Russia is actually doing much better? Because it has a purpose-based economy. The defense is purpose-based, it's not profit-based. And they have massive resources and massive industrial capacity. And those are the fundamentals that, remember, was always about fundamentals. If you follow the war day by day, you're not objective. That's nothing. It doesn't say anything. You need to always look at fundamentals. Fundamentals didn't change from day one in Ukraine.
Absolutely, and think about China. The panic across the collective West is primarily because of its economic rise, and then everything else is emerging from that. Its military strength is a product of its economic prosperity and the massive industrial base built up as its economy has risen, and it's a purpose-based economy. It's also one rooted in material reality. It is not a bunch of pyramid scams like across the collective West, where they've forfeited their industry and they've chosen to go along with these service-based industry, pyramid schemes, financial schemes of all kinds, because there's a lower overhead and it's more profitable, but it does not actually serve the purpose of running an actual country. These are all really important points. These are threads that run through every topic that we talk about. It's really important to get to all of them. Now, I see people in the comment section talking about the Russian-Iranian strategic partnership. I saw someone say, Alexander Mikuris of the Duran, suggesting that maybe this is going to be an opportunity for Russia and Iran to integrate their air defense system, or maybe Russia enhance Iranian air defenses. This would be a huge step in securing Iran militarily from direct military attack. But Iran has a lot of problems. My fear is, and I don't know if let me see if I can find the article. Angela, did you see the 100-year UK-Ukrainian?
I was going to mention that, but there's actually, it's important to look at the slogans. Keir Starmer saying that we have 100 years of agreement. Actually, it's based on nothing. They can revoke this. And it doesn't, it's actually surprising that a single person can declare that. So I would say this is like all a slogan. It's empty. It's really empty. And remember, Ukraine has this type of agreements with, I don't know how many countries, with the Baltic state, with Poland. It says basically, Zelensky, we've got your back. But we've got your back. But in reality, what is happening in terms of facts? You have the US, which is ready to step out. That means the biggest contributor will step out. That makes a huge difference. And then we see signals that Germany is saying, well, stop, we cannot afford more. And now you have these empty slogans by the UK saying that we do 100 years. I mean, in 100 years, we don't even know if in 2 years' time, Ukraine will still a nation state. So I think
if Earth will still exist, who knows?
No, exactly. And I would compare, but this is it's very cultural. It's based on emotion, it's slogans. But I would say that when you look at Iran, this is actually very tangible, because here you are talking about integration of economies, bypassing the US dollar. Those are real actions. And I would say I would say two very important points. I would say that we need to mention is air defense. Air defense is a game changer because Russia is the best air defense system in the world, and that means if this Russia helps Iran, that would make it much more difficult for Israel to attack Iran. And I would say one point which is extremely important is nuclear proliferation. I still think that actually Russia wants Iran not to get nuclear weapons, and it's probably the deal is probably we help you in defending your air by putting S-300, S-400, and on your side you try not to develop your nuclear weapons, because I still think that you have most that, and this is probably from both sides, they do not want to have nuclear proliferation because it is dramatic. There's already too many countries having nuclear power that is dangerous over time, and that's something I would say once actually the security agreement is reached, hopefully in Europe. I think this is a topic that responsible countries around the world should sit down, but that requires adults around the table.
That's a good point. I think Russia, like we always try to point out, Russia, China, these are nations that are thinking several steps ahead. They understand that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, and they would be almost insane not to want nuclear weapons, considering what they saw happen to the east and west of their borders, U.S. invasions and occupations spanning decades, death and destruction, a death toll over 1 million in Iraq, 500,000 children exterminated by U.S. sanctions, and they're looking at their place in the queue. But I think Russia understands that if that happens, if Iran develops nuclear weapons, the U.S. sees an opportunity to say maybe transfer nuclear weapons over to Ukraine. The U.S. they had this idea floating around in their head about giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine, but I think they stopped and thought, wait, if we do that, maybe the Russians are going to give nuclear weapons to Iran. That would be very bad. We don't really want that to happen. So there's a bit of a chess game going on. The reason I wanted to point this out, now, Angela, you pointed out key differences between the Russian-Iranian partnership, the UK-Ukrainian partnership. The UK has literally nothing to offer Ukraine in any of the fields except maybe this one down here. Hold on a second. Countering foreign information manipulation and interference. And by that, they mean enhancing Ukrainian propaganda. The British are the uncontested masters of that. They have a lot to offer Ukraine in that field. I think we've seen the result of that over the last 3 years. The Ukrainian propaganda machine is a joint enterprise of U.S. and British propaganda. So that is one area of cooperation. I think the UK has a lot to offer, but the rest of this, it is nonsense. It is a political stunt. It is a stand-in. It is a distraction from Ukraine's incremental collapse. We look at the line of contact every day, and we see Russia making progress. We see the Ukrainian military hollowing out, and we see the US and the rest of NATO thinking about, what are they going to do next? What if Ukraine's military really does start to unravel? What are they going to do? And they've been basically preparing for an intervention, a creation of a buffer zone in Ukraine. And again, just like we said about the proliferation of nuclear weapons, they're thinking about, if we do this, then what is Russia going to do? And then what are we going to do? And they have to think several steps ahead. And I think they're not quite sure how this is going to play out ultimately. But what I was worried about was Iran is kind of in a vulnerable place. Nobody can deny that the collapse of Syria has left Iran more vulnerable, more isolated. And the collapse of Syria is an indicator of not only Iranian weakness, but also Russian weakness. They are overextended. They did not have the resources to commit whatever excuse you want to make for why Syria collapsed. If Russia and Iran were stronger, that would not have happened, and it did. So this is an indicator that there are weaknesses, there are cracks beginning to show. How deep do they go? We don't know, but this is a wake-up call that multipolarism is not a done deal. This is a pivotal struggle hanging in the balance at the moment. But we see cracks appearing all across the collective West as well. So who's going to manage the opportunities and the vulnerabilities better and come out on top? That is the question. This is what we're trying to lend our voices to, even in the smallest way, to kind of tilt the balance in favor of multipolarism and a balance of power worldwide. So, Angela, you have anything else you want to say about the Russian-Iranian strategic partnership itself? Because next I want to get into how it might. We talked a little bit about how it connects to Ukraine, maybe how it's going to connect to what's going on in the Middle East.
Yes, I think it's important just to go back to the philosophy behind the multipolar world. It's about non-alliances. It's about having some partnerships, but they see alliances as being a liability. They don't want to go into the logic of what the collective West is doing. The collective West, especially under NATO, it's one that is attacked. Everybody is attacked. In reality, it's very pragmatic. It's how we can cooperate and actually how we can engage. The idea is you engage, but you might even engage with your enemies. You see, because once you start engaging, what does it happen? I mean, you can engage. There's many ways, but mainly it's economically. You engage and you have leverage over you. You know, could it be competitors or partners? And then somehow you avoid to have wars. So in reality, I would say this is why, actually, just going back to what you mentioned before, this disagreement between Russia and Iran, they are against sanctions, but full stop. Sanctions against anyone, because that's the whole logic of the West, and somehow they want to establish this on a multipolar. On this new multipolar world. So I would say people need to just always remember, it's not BRICS or two blocks like the logic of blocks. This is the collective West, and not so much aligned. I would say it's not an alliance of BRICS. BRICS is being used for whatever. It's a pool. There are pools of tools within BRICS, and it's a pick and choose. What is good for you within BRICS? You go inside BRICS and you work with BRICS country. What is not good for your own interests, you leave it aside. So somehow there's nothing which is related to defense in BRICS. And this is why actually you have this type of agreements between Iran and Russia, but somehow it's an extension of BRICS. If you look at carefully, they're mentioning SWIFT. How you bypass SWIFT. Actually, the solutions can be bilateral or within BRICS entity having a tool that actually fits for everybody. So here it's more like an integration, because they are much more attacked than China is at the moment. So far, China will be attacked in the near future, especially now with Trump. There's going to be sanctions, and Trump is going to go heavily after China. But I would say, as they are attacked, then you have the logic of joining forces. The same as it was unthinkable during World War II. You had the Germans joining forces with the Japanese, and they had absolutely nothing in common. But that's the logic of you enemy of you, the enemy, friends of friends, and enemies of enemies. This whole thing, this whole logic. So this is more tangible. So when we compare like with what happened in UK, I just want to go back to the UK, because actually you mentioned the UK has nothing to offer to Ukraine, and actually I think it reminds me of the interview of Victor Gao. I don't know if you remember, the BBC was interviewing Victor Gao, and they were saying, UK is your competitor. And Victor Gao was going one by one industries. He was saying UV, vehicles, electric vehicles. Well, you're not a competitor. You nowhere near what we are doing. Industrial level, well, where do you compete with China? You don't. You're not a competitor. We are not. We don't compete because you're nowhere near. You're nowhere near. When you look at those armies in Europe, there's no serious army. Probably the only serious army in Europe is probably Turkey. Kind of credible. But ultimately, I think when you look at Russia, China, and Iran, they know their limits. China, especially now, when you see Russia cannot overextend. And this is why it had to leave Syria. And that was a very wise move, because you need to look at your national interest, and you don't want to fall in the trap, because Syria is probably a trap for Russia. Now, people need to remember that China, even though it has a very strong military-industrial capacity, yes, okay, but you cannot project power. And this is extremely important. This is why, because China has only a few army bases outside China. I think it's Djibouti, but it's very marginal. But other than that, China cannot actually go around the world because, and fight against the US, because it cannot project power. China can only defend itself close to China. And this is why I would say, from my personal point of view, I would say that the biggest risk that China has over long term is maritime routes, because they would actually try to suffocate Chinese economy by shutting down their routes. And I would say what is important for China is the resources in terms of energy. You don't want to fall into the trap that Japan fell into. The US blocked Japan just before Pearl Harbor. Well, the risk for China is actually blockade. And that's the most important for China. But China is in a very weak position because it cannot project force. And China doesn't want to project force, but it needs to have, to protect its national interests. And this is where the West can hit China, is the maritime routes.
Yeah, so this is a good point that you're bringing up, Angela. I want to show this up here real quick. They say, I disagree with you that the fall of Syria shows weakness of Russia and Iran. What did you want Russia to do? Send millions of Russians to fight for Syria? You're wrong. I'm not really sure what I'm wrong about. If Russia and Iran could have stopped Syria from collapsing, they would have. They couldn't, because they didn't have the ability to do that. That is weakness, whether you want to admit it or not. It's not as if I'm cheering it on or satisfied with the outcome. I was speaking up against U.S. meddling in Syria since it began all the way back in 2011. I've written hundreds, if not thousands, of articles from then until now about Syria before I started doing videos. So it's not as if I'm satisfied with the outcome, but I'm just pointing out an objective truth. They tried to keep Syria propped up, and they failed because they were weak. The U.S. didn't use millions of troops to overrun Syria. They used hundreds, maybe several thousand, heavily armed, well-trained, well-prepared militants, vicious terrorists, combined with vicious terrorists, drone technology. And Syria simply didn't have that. They were hollowed out economically, militarily. Russia and Iran did not have enough resources to keep the economy propped up or to keep the military propped up. That is just a fact. And that is a weakness. And it's also a reality. It's also one point of their comment that is right. No, I didn't expect Russia to double down on Syria, just as you said, Angelo. It was a trap. It was meant to overextend. I had this up. I didn't have this up because I was going to share it today. But since I have it open anyway, we were talking about this before the show. Extending Russia. It's literally a chapter in this 2019 Rand Corporation paper, Extending Russia. Arm the militants in Syria, cause Russia problems in Syria. So Russia made a strategic decision. They know that they are facing overextension and having possible cracks appear that they cannot repair. So they said, we have to make a decision. We are invested in Ukraine, heavily invested in Ukraine. This is a priority. Syria, we will come back to later. We'll circle back to Syria later. The same goes for Libya. In 2011, if Russia could have stopped the United States from dismembering Libya, they would have. They couldn't. Just as China could not project military power that far abroad, neither could Russia. Syria was even a stretch for Russia. So this is what we're trying to explain. We're trying to explain objective reality. This is not about pandering to audiences and telling them what they want to hear. This isn't about me telling you what I wish happened. I'm just telling you what did happen and why Russia made the decision it made. So I agree with Amos. Russia should not have done that. That would have been falling into a trap. The problem is, though, it does demonstrate serious limits to Russian and Iranian power. And now Iran is isolated. Alexander Mikharos is talking about the air defense of Iran, because now with Syria gone, and one of the first things the U.S. and Israel did as the government and military collapsed was completely eradicate the Syrian integrated air defense system. That no longer exists. Israel, the U.S., any other nation involved in any sort of coalition against Iran, they can now fly freely, unhindered, with total impunity through Syrian airspace. That is basically now U.S.-Israeli airspace for them to do what they will. And that was one of the reasons they wanted to remove Syria from the map. Between that and complicating logistics between Iran and Hezbollah, that was the whole point of it. And they succeeded. We have to admit that they succeeded. We cannot bury our heads in denial and say that, oh, that didn't happen. Oh, it's not a big deal. It happened. It's a big deal. And I don't think we want to become like, say, the pro-Ukrainian NAFO crowd, where they're watching Ukraine accelerate backwards toward Kiev every day, faster and faster. And they're still trying to convince you that somehow they're winning. They're not. And they have to face reality. And we have to face reality. So I think as you were talking, Angela, I showed this up on the screen. What do you think about this? Because I also in this Guardian piece, they're talking about how the Russian economy is on the ropes. These drone attacks by Ukraine on Russian oil infrastructure is going to affect output, and they're talking about how the output is down however many percentage points. But then I was looking at these articles also from the Western media, and they're saying that the exports fell, but revenue rose. And then it was funny because one or the other of these articles says Russia is only sending oil now to China and India. And I'm like, either one of those has a larger population than all of the G7 combined. And so it's like more than 2 times the size of G7. That is the market Russia is only exporting oil to. So what do you make of that part of it, Angela, before maybe we get into the ceasefire?
Yes, I want to add one more thing. It's very, very important. You mentioned actually you're comparing G7 and China and those countries that are very industrialized like China. Actually, in reality, the consumption of China is massive. It is massive because it's heavily industrialized, and this is why actually you have the difference of a real economy, which is China, where you actually produce tangible things, and these industrialized economies like you have in Europe, but especially in the US. It's a financial economy, which is very much inflated. It's built on nothing because they've transferred all the heavy industries. So I would say, well, China actually is one of the biggest actually consumer because it's producing for most of the world. So in reality, when it comes to the real actually power struggle between the West and the rest, well, you see this combination of China and Russia, which is extremely impressive, because you have natural resources from Russia, the richest country in terms of natural resources. And Russia has everything that actually China is lacking. In China, you have the population plus a huge industrial base. And that's what is carry for the West. And I would say what Trump, my impression is that Trump is less ideology driven than the Democrats. That's one of the main difference. But he wants to, probably be much stronger on the economic side, but he's willing to use very harsh measures towards China, and I would say blockade, and will be very tough on that. So that's the slight differences I would say between actually the Biden administration and Trump. Trump is more realistic. What I mean by realistic is less into like this globalist order in terms of ideology. Is the conservative version of the Democrats. That's the slight difference.
I think the difference is Trump just says we're going to steal the oil, while the Democrats and Trump are both working for the exact same interests, the exact same agenda. You have a lot of politicians trying to dress it up and Trump just comes out and says, we're going to steal the oil. And the thing that's dangerous about this is, and we were talking about this before the show started too, about how there is a cult built up all around Trump, how dangerous this is. Because what that does is even people who voted for him because they, for some reason, thought that he was going to oppose all the wars because he said he was, but there's no chance that he's ever going to. The danger is that when he goes ahead and continues all the wars, just as he did during his first 4 years in office, because it's more like a cult than people being objective and rational and saying, wait, that's not what I voted for, and try to hold him accountable, they'll actually just go along with it. And naked imperialism, exploitation, and aggression that comes out worse than usual when Trump is president, or when Republicans are president, that will be normalized, and people will, instead of opposing war abroad, they will be all for it in a very direct and ugly way. They won't even try to dress it up. Although I think we could agree, and we've talked about this for a long time too, how despite all of the smoke screens the collective West likes to put up, they feel that they're superior and the world is theirs to do with what they please. And other nations are not even entitled to do what they want within their own borders. I mean, this is the whole problem the U.S. has with China over Taiwan. They're trying to literally carve territory off of China that they themselves agreed was China. And that is the root of this tension over Taiwan, not to rope in another totally different topic, but that is the problem. So yes, I think people have to be careful, because if you say, Angela, that he's different or
no,
he's obviously advancing the agenda, though. It's just in a different style, I guess.
It's just a different style. But I would say we were talking about this actually just before the show, and we have some friends that are actually backing Trump, and well, because I think people need hope. They need hope. And
yes.
It's this wishful thinking. It's just like, oh, it cannot be another cycle of elected regret, right? And they see a few signals that are actually positive, and I join them on that. Let's say, well, I think Trump had his contribution to stopping, for the time being, the war in Gaza. But ultimately, the long-term goal is going to be the same: complete annihilation of the Palestinians. They're gonna throw them into the desert. It's going to take, I don't know, 6 months, 1 year, 10 years, but that's what will happen. That's the long-term goal. I would say, when you look at the teams, Elon Musk, he's got Twitter, somehow we got a voice through that. There's a few, positive. There's Tulsi Gabbard, there's RFK when it comes to health. But ultimately, just look at, and this is a very important point, if you are a Trump supporter, prove me that it's not a cult. You're not criticizing the coin, the main coin that Trump issued, where he made probably, I don't know, it's close to $10 billion. But this is massive. This is massive. Do you think it's right to do that? And the problem is that, why is it a cult? It's because people, they're so much blinded by Trump. They try to kill him, and there's all this nice story behind Trump. He's back. They've been after him, and I get that. But you need to be able to criticize what he just did. He pocketed probably more than $10 billion. What does it say about the morality of the system? That's why I say this is a cult. If you are blinded, you need to be able to criticize even your best friend and even your family. And that's the problem. We are into a cult. And they've divided, but they are, as Galloway says, they are two cheeks of the same arse. Excuse me the language.
Yes,
but that's what
he does
is.
say that. Yes, that's true.
That's what he says. But ultimately, if you don't criticize what Trump is doing, you can back Trump, but be objective and be honest with yourself. What he just did, that's a big steal. And I would say people need to be extremely careful. This is a crypto oligarch groups that are going to be extremely rich, extremely powerful. Elon Musk is going to gain so much power through that. Keep in mind that Elon Musk not only is the richest man on earth, He's the most influential man on earth. He's part of the military-industrial complex, and he's behind the success of Trump. That is going to make him bolder and extremely powerful. Now you have this, there's on Polymarket, it's an aggregate of betting, but it's closer to the polls actually. It's because that's the money talk. 65% of probability that Bitcoin is going to be a U.S. reserve currency. Why is that? It's because the people that actually backed Trump are all from the crypto industry. That means that those guys, they are going to become extremely, extremely rich. And you know who's the biggest player right now? It's BlackRock. It didn't change. The team didn't change. What happened is that it's a shift between two factions of the oligarch. But those people, Trump, he has not been inaugurated. He just made probably more than $10 billion. Because I cannot say the exact figure. I need to figure out exactly what is the percentage he has, but it's skyrocketing. You can check, on Coin Market. You can check. You can even, you can go on Grok, ask Grok. Grok tells you it's probably over $10 billion. So those people are going to get much richer.
Yes, well, and this is the thing. We don't need more special interest groups getting in on. There's already deeply established, entrenched monopolies that are driving U.S. foreign policy. And this comment that I have up on the screen says, I got your point, then put Kamala or Biden instead of Trump if you're already so unhappy about Trump. This is what we're talking about. This demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of what is actually going on. It literally does not matter at all who is in office, whether it was Biden, who doesn't even know where he is, Kamala, who doesn't even have the benefit of being senile to explain why she doesn't understand what's going on or where she is, or Trump, who just openly says we're going to pillage the planet. They all answer to just as Angelo's explaining in detail, they all work for the exact same special interests. It is the exact same policy being pushed forward. It's going to be the same death and destruction cut from one side of the planet to the other as these wars all continue uninterrupted. I don't understand why at this point, maybe that person is very young and they don't remember Bush and then Obama swearing he's going to end all the wars and then continuing them and starting new wars. And then Trump saying, I'm going to end all the wars and then continuing all the wars and try to start new wars. And then Biden coming in, setting the stage for Trump to now go after China, Iran, Venezuela. Biden for 4 years set the stage for that. They pretend like they're different. This is a strategy of tension. It's meant to divide people, create fear and anger, and have them invested in this process so that they don't all find common ground, get together and say, the whole system is the problem. We need to get rid of the whole system, not keep voting one tent pole after the other. Both of them are holding this corrupt, rotting tent that's blocking out the sun for all of us. People gotta wake up to that. And I get frustrated because it's friends and family who these are people who are very smart, but they like you say, Angelo, it's wishful thinking. They want to hope, but as I always say, hope is the first step on the road to disappointment. Everybody who was behind Trump the first 4 years, buying into his sales pitch, they have to be disappointed inside, even if they've made a list of excuses a mile long for why he did all the things that he did. But they have to be disappointed. That's where hope gets you. Be objective, be realistic, follow the truth wherever it takes you, no matter how uncomfortable it makes you. I think this is very important for people to understand about Western style. Like Angela, you just explained it at the beginning that it's about sovereignty and self-determination. There's nothing. Western style democracy has nothing to do with any of this. It's a system of control. What were you going to say, Angelo?
No, but we personally, you and I, we fell into the trap of the Obama. I mean, I did believe that he was an actor for change, and actually was very well crafted. When you look at how they put him in power, actually he was one of the very few to vote against the Iraqi war. One of the very few. That means that When he came out and he said, I want to be the next president, we believed because he had a track record. But guess what? Because they had pre-selected him before, even before he had to vote for the Iraqi war. So basically, he was the actor for change. He was not even elected. He got the Nobel Peace Prize. And I fell into the trap because I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that the US was better than what it showed. There's hope. There's so much hope. And we were millions. And guess what? Now we're giving the chance again to the same person that actually we were fooled because he had the chance. And everybody's saying, well, he didn't have the power. He was the first term. He was inexperienced. Well, it goes back to this quote. I mean, how do we say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And what is going to happen? Well, yes, there's going to be some changes, but those reforms are going to be opportunities for the oligarch. Deregulation. What do you think it is about? When you start to deregulate, you dismantle the state, and actually you take whatever is good, it's going to be and profitable is going to be transferred to the oligarch. You privatize profit. And whatever is not profitable, just leave it there. But they say it's about efficiency. Of course, everybody would want to have the government to be more efficient. Of course. But here, the purpose, that's how they start. It is about liberalization, which is a nice word in itself. Liberal, it's a nice word. But that's how they also use democracy. Those are nice words, and they appropriate themselves those words. But in reality, it's going to be about wealth transfer. And guess what? Now they have their hands on the money, meaning they have the power maybe to transfer some power into the crypto world. And that is going to be a way for them to control better. Because once you have, Rothschild, he said, I don't care about the laws you do, but give me the power to print the money, and I will be happy with that. And that's what they're having now. And I would say for people, just follow closely what they are going to do with Bitcoin and all the crypto world. And that is, follow that, because this is where the power is, and they are going to become much more powerful. I'm talking about a faction, maybe not all of them, but a faction, and that the faction is whoever Peter Thiel, all the group that is behind Trump right now.
Hold on. One more. So they're saying there was not another option. This is what's being missed. There was no option. You were not given an option. Elections in the collective West, across the collective West, are a process of perception management. It has nothing to do with determining what policies are going to be implemented over the next however long their term is, 2 years, 4 years, however long their particular terms are. And Trump is not going to stop the war in Ukraine. If the war in Ukraine is to stop, it's only because the U.S. needs to start a bigger war somewhere else.
Exactly.
We already hear Trump setting the stage for war with Iran, regime change in Venezuela, and he's setting the stage for a war with China. A war with China that Biden very quietly, not many people were paying attention to this, but for 4 years, he didn't do anything. But under his administration, the U.S. Marine Corps was completely reorganized, an unprecedented process of reorganization to prepare to interdict Chinese shipping, which Angela was just explaining, not to fight China head on in an all-out war. They know they can't. They know that won't work. But what they think will work is cutting Chinese maritime shipping beyond the reach of the Chinese military, because the Chinese military really does not pose a threat to the rest of the world. It cannot project military power around the globe. So that is what was being prepared by Biden, hand in hand with Trump. The baton has been handed over. It's continuity of agenda. It always has been. And it's going to be. If you want an option, if you want to pick something that might have an impact on unipolarism versus multipolarism, every time you spend money, pick an option outside the corporate interest driving Western unipolarism. Spend your money locally if you can. Pay into companies, services, products from outside the collective West. That will make a difference. You might say, I'm just one person. what difference could that make? The collective West rose to power because of individuals year after year, millions of them all together making collective decisions in favor of Western hegemony. And it will be undone by millions of people every single day doing little things that add up to undo it. So this is how we have, like you say, Angela, you have to get a grip on how a country and how power actually works. To think that there's an election and the people have spoken, so these billionaires with private armies are just going to do what we told them, that is horrifically naive. That is dangerously naive. I used to think it too. So I'm not trying to look down on people. I thought like this too. I was so brainwashed and naive. I joined the U.S. Marine Corps. I vote the first and only time I voted in a presidential election. I voted for Bush Jr. That's how brainwashed and out into orbit I was from reality. So I'm just trying to share my awakening with other people so they can see through it and start making decisions that might actually make a difference, that are actual options. Yes, Angelo.
Just to add up to what we said just before, the maritime routes, Trump is not yet, president, but he's been talking about the Panama Canal. So that's already a sign. Now there's the Arctic route. Greenland is about the Arctic route. Maybe he doesn't want, maybe he won't get his hands on Greenland. Maybe he will. But this is a way to pressure Greenland and Denmark to have more army bases and to be more present in the region. Now you had what happened in South Korea. So South Korea, there was a coup. They did a false flag. They tried to disguise South Korean army into North Korean army and actually to do a false flag. And then you have the martial law, which could have been escalating. And then there's a trilateral alliance, South Korea, Japan, and the US. And, this alliance would actually fight against kind of de facto, Russia, North Korea, and China. So you see that there's a shift already, and the shift is China. So now the only difference is that he wants to withdraw from Ukraine, because who's overextending now is the US. They've been supplying too many weapons. Actually, they have demilitarized, actually, and they need to rebuild this production capacity. But now they cannot. They're being very pragmatic, so they're going to focus completely on China. And I would say we are going to be much busier on China, on the whole region for this year, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. And this is what we're trying, this is what I'm worried about. I'm worried that all of these people who have invested hope in Trump, I know people who are very optimistic, or I wouldn't say, maybe not optimistic, trying to give President-elect Donald Trump benefit of the doubt. Okay, fair enough. And I'm almost certain that most of these people, when Trump exposes himself as just continuing with the neocon agenda, they will speak up about it. They're not going to try to justify it or make excuses. But so many other people already are. They're already doing it. They're already saying, well, he's doing this, but because of this. And if you find yourself saying that, it's because you just don't want to admit what just happened. Again, it's not like the first time he's been in office. I feel tired talking about Trump. Let's see what else we have.
No, but Brian, I think it's about us also being objective of, if Trump does something good, we'll say it. Actually, the reality is that somehow there's a breathing room, I would say, for Gaza. But it's breathing room. But that's positive. If Trump was behind this, maybe it's positive. If he does something on Ukraine, that's positive. But knowing that, the ultimate goal is China. But the problem is that, you see, I might have positive things on Trump, but what happened when I saw the last 4 years with Biden, I had not a single thing. I had absolutely nothing on Biden. He didn't do a single thing. Even, I would say, even internally, what did he? Absolutely not. Absolutely, I'm even surprised that he got like 30% of support. So that's a difference, I would say, between Biden and Trump. But again, let's judge on actions. But I'm not positive.
Well, here's my problem with this whole situation with Gaza, and I've tried to we've both tried to explain this many times as well. This is another point of contention where emotions have blinded people from the ability to reason and be objective. We have pointed out how Hamas it's confined to this tiny little strip. Even the Israeli media admits that the Netanyahu administration wanted an extremist organization in power. It guaranteed there would be no two-state solution. And what it was a strategy of tension. If people remember, if you Google strategy of tension, Google will tell you all about in Italy during the Cold War, the strategy of tension where the state, together with the US, NATO, carried out right-wing extremist terrorism to scare people, to scare people into the arms of government, to ensure that the client regimes the US wanted in power in Europe stayed in place or could be maneuvered into place. They're doing the exact same thing with Hamas. Hamas stemming from the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda being the indispensable proxies and pretexts the US has used, not just in the Middle East, but all around the world. As proxies to fight nations they can't invade and occupy, and as a pretext to invade and occupy a targeted nation. This is what they predicated the invasion of Syria on. We have to stop ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They created ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They armed them. They just handed Syria to them. So this is what people have to understand about Hamas. We see what Israel is doing. They deliberately do this to get an emotional reaction from people, to blind them with their emotions so that they attach themselves to anything that looks like resistance to Israel, even if it really isn't, even if it's controlled resistance. So when people talk about Israel, oh, they didn't defeat Hamas, so this is a victory for Hamas. I see a lot of people saying this. If it was a legitimate resistance organization, that would be true. But the truth of the matter is Israel has no interest in getting rid of Hamas any more than the US has interest in getting rid of Al-Qaeda. It is indispensable for the continued radicalization of Israeli society, the militarization of the Israeli state, and the use of Israel as a militarized proxy by the US across the entire region. Again, read the policy papers. That's where the foreign policy is actually being determined. We read the policy papers and we present them to you, so you don't have to read hundreds of pages of it. But those are the policies, and they're written years in the past, and every single page verbatim is being implemented, no matter who is in the White House, no matter who is in Congress. And so they have written about this in excruciating detail about how to use Israel to get rid of Syria, Hezbollah, and ultimately Iran, with the US being able to kind of distance itself, create plausible deniability for itself, and pin all of the repercussions and retaliation on Israel, a disposable proxy just like Ukraine is. And people get Ukraine, but they don't quite get Israel. And I think if Ukraine sticks around, say 20, 30, 40, 50 years like Israel has, maybe like in the distant future, people will be talking about how the Ukraine lobby controls all of the collective West because the US and Europe are always giving them weapons and bolstering them on Russia's borders. What do you think about this, Angela?
Well, Brian, we remember from day one, we actually mentioned this was not an intelligence failure. It was obvious. You see actually what Israel and Mossad can do. You know, the pager, they actually infiltrated Hezbollah with, I mean, all the pages of Hezbollah where actually they planted bombs inside, mini bombs, right? They've been killing so many people around the world, extremely precise. And you couldn't tell me that actually they didn't see actually Hamas attacking Israel. I mean, and the problem you see, and this comes back to the wishful thinking that we mentioned about Trump. People, they want so much hope. You know, they want hope for change. And so basically when that happened, you had to be pro-Hamas. You could, we are all for the people of Palestine. Of course, this is dramatic what is happening there. But you need to step out and say, well, you know, why did this happen? And is it actually the useful tool? Hamas was a useful tool for Israel to achieve some of its objectives. So basically they close an eye, and actually there was this Hannibal directive, you know, they even shoot Israelis shoot on other Israelis to make it bigger. So in reality, when you look at this way, and then you look at the background of Hamas, there's the Muslim Brotherhood. Those are extremely inconvenient. And I do understand that people, when you look at the resistance in Gaza, the only remaining resistance, the main one is Hamas. So when you criticize Hamas, de facto for those people, because it's always like you are either with us or against us. But
Yes.
once you are more nuanced, you bring some nuance. People, they do not get that there's a nuance there. And actually, Hamas was a tool. Ultimately, you see, when you look at the project of Greater Israel, everything is linked. Everything, absolutely everything. Hamas the Gaza population, the land is shrinking, is weakened. There's a genocide. A lot of people died, and ultimately they might be able to pour them into the Sinai. I don't know when, to Egypt. Now it has emboldened Israel, so now actually can be much more aggressive in the occupied territories, and now it's expanding. It's got some land because everything is related. You see, there's weakened somehow. Hezbollah was focusing on what was happening in Lebanon, right? So they could not help out Syria. Syria was very weak. You see, everything was linked. And going back also to the fact that Hamas actually, at some point, some factions of Hamas was fighting against Assad, and we look
2012.
exactly, and we look at. Ultimately, the difference, Assad at least was he didn't attack frontally Israel, but somehow he was a much better ally than HTS. HTS is actually saying, he's not opposing Israel. Israel is grabbing land. It's doing its great Israel project. So, well, sadly, it's sad. It's sad. I'm a bit disappointed. Some of our friends, they actually fell into the trap. That was the wishful thinking. It was so nice to be able to say, well, IDF in Israel is weak. It's not weak. If you look at the long-term plan, it's a very smart move what they did. And they were willing to pay that price, Israel. But ultimately, it's fulfilling Israel. It's fulfilling its function in the Middle East. Remember, Israel, the creation of Israel was to divide the Arab world between the Maghreb and the Levant, and actually to bring disruption. That was
yes.
And that's what it's doing. You have Lebanon destroyed, Palestine destroyed, Syria destroyed, and now they have access. They could potentially go through Syria, fly through Syria and Iraq, and actually bomb Iran. So they're fulfilling their position because that's what Israel is doing. It's doing that for the U.S. empire.
And because people hate Israel so much, again, it's rational to see what Israel is doing and be repulsed by it. And we're humans. We have emotions. My point is not to be unfeeling and unemotional, but it is put your emotions aside when it's time to make decisions and draw conclusions. Remember, Angela, we were showing people this Reuters article from 2012 where Hamas turned on Assad. They had fighters going to Syria even as Israel is stealing Palestinian land, brutalizing the Palestinian people. They were fighting side by side with CIA-backed and armed terrorists in Syria against the government of Bashar al-Assad. People told me, well, Brian, that was 2012. This is when we were talking about October 7, 2023. They said, Brian, that was from so long ago. That's 2012. Well, this is from last December. Hamas congratulates Syrians on ending Assad's rule. And by Syrians, they mean the CIA-backed terrorists, many of them not even from Syria. They've been imported from all over. The CIA backed them through Turkey, trained them, and deployed them into Syria to overrun the country. And this is who Hamas is cheering on, because Hamas is part of this. They're part of this amalgamation of groups and extremists that the West put together to deliberately, again, a strategy of tension in the region to help shape the region. We've always talked about how Russia stabilizing Syria, Iran mending ties with Saudi Arabia, the spread of BRICS across the region, how this was going to stabilize everything, and how in due time, if left unattended, this was going to pivot the whole region into a completely different direction. What is the one thing the U.S. can do? They cannot compete with China and Russia and Iran in terms of economics, peace, stability. They have no interest in that. What can they do? They can blow it up. They have a board game. They're losing. They flip it over. And so nobody can win. And for them, that works because they have no interest in taking anything from the Middle East. They simply want to deny it to others. This is what they have managed to do. And again, we have to understand, for Russia, why were they in Syria? Because they understand that if Syria collapses, Iran will be more vulnerable. They just signed a strategic partnership, possibly to help Iran posture as stronger than it is. I hope it's not that bad. But they understand that if Syria is gone, Iran is next. If Iran is gone, the U.S. is going to have a corridor straight to southern Russia through the Caucasus region. They will just swarm Russia with these terrorists once they're done ravaging, like a swarm of locusts, done ravaging the Middle East. They will go up through the Caucasus region again, because the two Chechen wars, this was U.S. proxy war as well inside Russian borders. So this is the big picture. People have to see the big picture to understand what is going on. Don't get too lost in the details of these very localized conflicts. Yes, the violence is horrific. People say, well, Brian, we're angry because of what is being done to the Palestinians. I'm angry too. I'm beside myself with rage when I watch this. People see me when I have the camera on and I seem calm and collected. They didn't see me the hour before when I was, enraged, like just physically enraged by what I am seeing. Watching. I have children. I could imagine this being done to my children by basically monsters, extremists and monsters working for the collective West who only want power and wealth and control over everybody. So I can see this being done to me personally. Angelo, you're in Hong Kong. You experienced U.S.-backed destabilization. Here in Thailand, I've experienced U.S.-backed destabilization. So this is very personal for us. What we're begging people to do is please see through the rhetoric that is designed to distract us and get us to invest in this rather than expose it and stop it. I think that is the one takeaway. I think, because we're over an hour and we have to do questions and answers. Angelo,
yeah,
do you have any last final takeaways?
Well, no. Well, just one more thing. Where the Hamas leadership was actually in Qatar. Qatar is actually joined with Turkey, which was backing HTS. That's another proof. So basically, Qatar has they had a project of pipeline between Qatar and Turkey, and Assad didn't want that. So that's one of the link. And actually, Hamas in reality was never close to Iran. Hezbollah is close to Iran, and Hezbollah is much more legitimate force. It's organic, yes. And it's been protecting Lebanon. So that's another one. So Hamas, again, Muslim Brotherhood, and we know what the Muslim Brotherhood have done. Muslim Brotherhood were behind all those color revolution in the region. What did it do for the region? I mean, we are for self-determination. Don't get me wrong. If there's uprising, that's people are discontent, and what we point out is foreign interference. That's what we point out. Ultimately, if they overthrow government and this is all organic, I mean, it's fine with us. People, who am I to judge? What we just pointing out is the interference, because what we want, and that's everywhere, it's self-determination. So if, let's say, I'll give you an example. That's a good example. In Argentina, personally, I don't like Milei, and I think he's a globalist and so on. But guess what? I think he's got some support, maybe 60 or 70%. Well, who am I? Who am I? My job is pointing out for interference. Is he legitimate? Is he really controlled by the West or not? That's my own. But ultimately, what I want is for people in Argentina to be happy with their government. And the legitimacy comes from the level of support. It doesn't come from casting a ballot. Casting a ballot we oversimplify democracy. No, I would say, I think a metric that is much more important of legitimacy is the level of support. Because if you have 80%, 90% of support of Putin in Russia and China, well, those are the metrics that are important. And not to me, but to Russians and Chinese. Because ultimately, who am I? And I'm not Argentinian. So if Argentinians love me later, I'm fine with that. He's a crazy guy, but I'm fine with that if they're happy, right?
Although I'll say two things. One thing is, in addition to Hamas leadership being in Qatar, so is this massive U.S. airbase. I think it's the largest airbase in the region, U.S. airbase in the region. That is also in Qatar. So start connecting the dots. I always say, stop following your emotions and your anger. Follow the money. It never lies. It never leads you astray. The other thing I would say is that I generally agree with that sentiment, Angelo, but do you think that in Argentina, the United States has not been busy managing public perception, manipulating and influencing people to go into one direction or another? Because I've seen that happen here in Thailand, where they've overwhelmed the information space and they're influencing the Thai people aren't coming to this conclusion objectively, rationally, or in pursuit of their best interests. Quite the opposite, actually. So I agree with you, Angelo, as long as there isn't foreign interference involved. I would say in Argentina is huge,
this massive,
Latin America is
absolutely. It's not, probably the one of the few remaining countries that are somehow sovereign is Venezuela. But even Venezuela, you have, Machado, the opposition was actually funded by NED. The opposition funded by the CIA. And you know what? They don't put them in jail because they don't want to have those, pretexts for condemnation and sanctions. So you have people that actually participate in elections funded by the CIA. They've been exposed. People don't vote for them. They don't want them, but they can walk freely in the streets. So Venezuela has been fighting this. Cuba, but they destroyed those economies. And I tell you, now this is
you've been there.
I've been in Venezuela. I had talks with people, and really, people have been starving, and they've been suffering so much that you get people to such a point that they are, well, you know what? Why don't we give the country to America? Some people, really, that's irresponsible, but that's their opinion. Somehow they say, well, you know what? We cannot take it anymore. But I'm talking about the type of life that people have locally is they barely can put food in the fridge. Basically, it's when they start to get worried when there's no more reserve in the fridge, really. And it's a day by day. It's not even paycheck by paycheck. It's really day by day. How can I make a living today so I have food? And actually, the protein intake is extremely low. I used to have daily meals. You have a set meal, like in restaurants, and actually the proportion of meat, it's the chicken now it's a very small slice. Everything is and what they're eating is mainly carbs. So there's pizza everywhere. Those stick Pizza Hut, and that's what they eat. People eat, carbs the whole time, and if they're lucky, they eat some meat. That's the reality. And you get people to a point they're willing to say, well, why don't we give all the resources, but I can't take it anymore. And somehow it can work. I believe that it could work, because people are suffering. That's the purpose of those sanctions. So it works on Venezuela because they made sure that the economy was not self-sufficient. So basically, they made an economy which is only based on natural resources, and they had to purchase everything else outside, and you make them dependent. And that's the whole idea of sovereignty. When you are talking about sovereignty, you need to be self-sufficient. That's also about a part of your national security. And that's what Russia has done. But Russia, because it has the critical size and it has the diversification of its economy. Now, the colonial era economies, they can suffer massively because it's only based on their natural resources. They haven't been industrialized, and they cannot even defend themselves because military spending is very low. So it's very easy to do a color revolution or even have jihadists in Africa. So sadly, that's the reality. And you have the last one, I would say, Cuba. But Cuba is still, they're proud people. But they, of course, the state is providing a lot, healthcare and so on. But they could live so much better. And I can understand people being desperate.
Yes, those are all very good points, and we make them often. We have to keep making them often because, again, these are things that the collective Western media is not going to tell you. All right, let's just get through the questions. We always not very good at doing this in time. What's to prevent Iran from experiencing the same kind of surprise CIA collapse that Syria did? This is the worry. The fact that Iran was not able to continue stabilizing Syria tells us that there are serious, urgent limits to what Iran can and cannot do. And if you talk to people that have been in Iran or from Iran, they will tell you that things are not all that great. Like maybe it's not as bad as some people might imagine, but in other ways it can be. So we don't know. You don't know. You don't know where the disposition of Iranian economic, military, political powers. A lot of these things can just sneak up on you. Sometimes it is not that obvious. I would say for people to just be aware of it, to be aware of it, and not underestimate America's ability to reap death and destruction. That is what they do best, and they're still well positioned to continue doing that. Why is the war in Ukraine still going on? Because Russia is fighting the summation of NATO military, political, and economic power. That this is going to be a tough fight. Is a war of attrition. Again, Russia did not have the power to just simply steamroll over Ukraine in 3 days, like we always hear about. Russia prepared years in advance for a war of attrition, not to steamroll Ukraine in 3 days. They knew it was going to be hard. It's not a war of choice. This was a war of self-preservation. NATO expanded up to Russia's border with full intention to absorb Russia. So they have to make a choice. Do we do something to stop this, or do we just allow it to run its course? Angela, anytime you want to.
No, I agree. It was a war of preservation, and again, people need to remember that this is not a war like Russia against Ukraine. It was a war against Russia against NATO, and I would say that this is not wishful thinking. This is a big humiliation. It's a wake-up call for NATO, and I would say a lot of things could happen out of this. What happened in Ukraine? I would say this could be extremely damaging for the EU, and possibly, I would say, big shift in the EU policies, or maybe even actually the end of the EU as this supranational entity.
Yeah, I think Europe is already suffering, to be honest with you. Do you agree that MAGA, America First, Peace Through Strength, etc., are all terms which neocons can get behind? The fact that these are neocon slogans. This is using Trump to rebrand neocon ideology and objectives. And when we say neocon, it's as if we're describing a very specific group. It is the unelected corporate financiers, special interests who, through the think tanks, drive U.S. foreign policy. Please read the think tank papers. They are specific. They spell everything out in surprising detail. Sometimes you're reading it, you're like, I cannot believe they're just saying all of this. But then you realize that ordinary people are never going to read these. Even when you show them extending Russia 100 times in your live streams and in your videos, and Which Path to Persia. I've been telling people about that paper from the Brookings Institution since they published it in 2009. I have asked people, have you read it yet? Like every year. No, No, you have to read it. You have to read it to understand what's going on. And then once you read it, then you will see through all of the political rhetoric that they use to dress all of this up, the continuity of agenda, to convince Americans that they have some sort of stake in this, in some means of changing it. They don't, not through elections. That's a good question, though. Let's see. How about this one? How will Israel instigate war, serious military action against Iran? Will the new pact with Russia change Israel's war with Iran? So again, a good question. But again, read Which Path to Persia. They spell it out. They don't care what happens to Israel. The whole point of using Israel to instigate war with Iran is to attract all of the retaliation, all of the international fallout, all of the condemnation, all of the consequences on America's proxy, Israel, just like they're doing with Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia, just like they're doing with Taiwan against the rest of China, just like they're doing with the Philippines against China. This is how the U.S. does its foreign policy, through proxies. It's no different in the Middle East. Hold on. Angela, again, if you have anything you want to add to this,
I agree with you.
Question.
Proxy, the function of Israel was always the same as divide the whole Middle East and bring chaos and control it somehow. Control if you can. If you cannot control, just destroy it.
Yes, this I wouldn't describe it as peace. I would say it's a temporary reprieve. And if you've been following this conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, you will see that it goes through this cycle every single time. The cycle of violence is always very conveniently timed. The last time was in 2014. I don't know if people remember this. This was a critical year for the U.S. trying to get the regime change going in Syria. And they used the violence of Israel against the Palestinians to kind of boost the credibility of both Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. They used it to supercharge the movement, attract supporters and recruits. And they also used it to undermine Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Iran. And that is why they keep this going. This is why Israel's never going to get rid of Hamas. As long as they need to use this strategy of tension against any other interest in the region, they're going to keep them around. So there's that. So no, don't hold your breath waiting for this to it's not. It's just going to be a temporary reprieve. That yes, Israel needs to kind of reorganize, rearm, and get ready for the next round of violence. That's how it has always gone. There's no indication that this time is different. People are talking about Trump putting pressure on Israel. He's the one who moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, and he has, just alongside Biden and every other U.S. president, they give Israel a blank check, just like they're giving Ukraine a blank check to just do anything that they want. It's just, again, there's no evidence that anything is going to.
And there are so many similarities between Ukraine and Israel. Actually, when you look at all the funding that is coming from abroad to Israel, it shows clearly that Israel is not really a viable state. You know, it's all funding from the U.S. It's very artificial. And this whole indoctrination, how do you get people to fight for you? You have to indoctrinate them on, they're using actually the Bible, this whole thing about elected people. We have a mission. We're going back to the original land and so on, which, by the way, most of Israelis are Europeans descended. They have nothing to do with the region. But I don't want to go too deep into that. Now, Ukraine is exactly the same. It's even worse, Ukraine. Now, all the land, the land is being taken by BlackRock. You have all the mineral, the mining is actually all in the Donbass, the rich area. And now they might lose access to the sea. So it's not a viable state. It's all GDP is built on the donation and the military aid that is given by NATO in exchange of providing cannon fodder for the war. And that's the function of Ukraine. It's exactly the same. And you've seen many actually links between the two, Ukraine and Israel. Even actually Zelensky at some point saying, well, maybe we could become the Israel of the region. So imagine, yes. It's not by chance he's saying that. It's probably what the US has been actually telling Zelensky. You see what we did with Israel? We've got the back of Israel. You can do whatever you want. You never go to the ICC, ICJ. You have no problem. We've got you back because we need you as the new Israel in the region. And now what they want to, what they try desperately in another region in East Asia is to get either Japan or South Korea or Taiwan to become that Israel function, as just a tool. How did they used to call Taiwan as the unthinkable warship, U.S. warship, right? What was the name? But there was
unsinkable aircraft carrier. Yes.
So there was already this vision there on, let's use Taiwan to contain China. It was all along this project, and so that's what they do, and it's not because they know that the whole culture they're not about because there's been social engineering, they've been isolating the individual, so it's not in reality it's not a united nation in terms of what you have in Russia. Russians, they fight for their tradition, they're very patriotic, and they have values in terms of religions, this history and so on. The US is different. I do not see Americans do the same as they did when there was a Vietnam War to fight into trenches. I would never see. Would you imagine that? No, it's impossible. So the only way that the US actually can fight a war is through proxy.
That's a good point. It's a good point. And because the US isn't just fighting one war, they're fighting wars all across the entire planet. It's more than they can do by themselves. And you see this, again, in the think tank policy papers. That's all they talk about is how we can't build enough ships to keep up with China. We can't even try. Let's just give up trying. Let's have Japan and South Korea build ships for us, or at least help us fix our ships, because we can't even fix our own ships anymore. And I'm not even kidding. That is in these policy papers. We could get to that in another time. This will be there's a lot of other good questions, but this will be the last one for today. And it's kind of a joke. When will I be available on Red Note? That's something we didn't get into yet. The ban on TikTok. Incredible how the U.S. wrings its hands and beats its chest and tears its clothes when China or Russia say Facebook, Twitter out, Google, YouTube out. Articles in the Western media admitting they're working with the State Department to overthrow governments and carry out sedition, basically. And they'll wring their hands and cry about being expelled from these other countries, but then they turn around and do the exact same thing, predicated on the exact same pretext, whether it's true or not. Maybe Carl Za will pop in again next week or whenever we do the next stream. I want to thank you, Angelo, for joining me, spending your time. What is today? Sunday evening. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Check the video description below for all the places you can find me and Angelo across different platforms, ways you can help support our work. That is all greatly appreciated. And until next time, bye for now.